I never thought I'd see my dad fall in love again, let alone with someone who made my skin crawl. When Mom left, she didn't take much, just her books, a few framed photos, and the smell of lavender that used to fill the hallways. For months, Dad wandered the house like a ghost, cooking frozen dinners and pretending everything was fine. Then one day, she appeared. Lena. She arrived at our door carrying a pie she said she'd baked herself, smiling too wide. Her perfume so heavy it replaced the lavender. Dad met her at work, at least that's what he told me. She's helping me move on, he said, voice trembling like he needed me to believe it for his own sake. I wanted to. God, I really did. But the moment her eyes met mine, something inside me whispered, don't trust her. She looked at me the way some people look at puzzles, like she was figuring out which pieces to move first. The first few weeks, she played the sweet role perfectly. She'd bring groceries, cook elaborate dinners, laugh at Dad's tired jokes. She even started calling me, sweetheart, the same word Mom used when I was little. Only from her lips, it sounded like a warning. One night, I caught her in Dad's study, standing over his desk. The light from the computer screen painted her face blue. Couldn't sleep? I asked. She jumped, slammed the laptop shut. Just printing something for your dad. But there was no printer sound, no paper anywhere. The next morning, I checked the browser history. Everything had been wiped clean. Dad noticed my silence at breakfast. You okay, kiddo? I nodded. Lying felt easier than starting a fight. Because every time I tried to tell him that something about Lena felt wrong, he looked at me with that tired, desperate expression. The one that said, please don't take this from me too. So I stopped trying. Instead, I started watching. Lena had small habits that didn't fit the image she tried to sell. She always wore long sleeves, even in heat. She flinched when someone mentioned hospitals. And she had this nervous tic, twirling her ring finger like she missed a ring that used to be there. One Saturday morning, Dad announced he and Lena were moving in together. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like a bad joke. Already? I asked. It's been what, 2 months? He frowned. You used to tell me you wanted me happy. What happened to that? I still do, I said. Just, not like this. He sighed, the way parents do when they're done listening. You'll understand when you're older. That line hit harder than it should have. I wasn't a kid anymore. I was 19, working nights. Helping with bills while he tried to rebuild his life. And still, he talked to me like I was the problem. When Lena moved in, she made the house her own. My mom's photos disappeared from the hallway. The lavender candles vanished. Even Dad's old wedding ring, gone. Every trace of Mom erased, like someone hitting delete over and over until there was no memory left. But there was one thing she didn't know. Every Friday afternoon, I drove to the edge of town, to a small bakery with cracked windows and a cash only sign. That's where Mom worked now, wearing an apron that never seemed to stay clean. We didn't talk about Dad. We didn't talk about Lena. We just shared coffee and stories and pretended life hadn't split us in two. Until one Friday, Mom looked up from her cup and asked, does she still have that scar on her wrist? I froze. What scar? She looked down, tracing a faint line on her own wrist. She used to cover it with bracelets. Back when she lived next door. Next door? I repeated. Mom's eyes widened. You mean you don't know who she is? That was the moment the floor dropped beneath me. The world that had felt off suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. And for the first time since she left, Mom's voice shook when she said, she used to babysit you. After that day at the bakery, everything changed. Every time Lena spoke, I heard Mom's voice in my head asking, she used to babysit you? That word, used to, stuck to me like dust I couldn't shake off. When I got home, Lena was in the kitchen humming. It was the same lullaby Mom used to sing when I couldn't sleep. She stopped mid-note when she saw me standing there and asked if I wanted dinner. I said nothing. When she reached for the pot, her sleeve slid back and I saw a thin scar on her wrist. I asked where she got it. She smiled and said, you'd be surprised what we forget from childhood. Then she turned back to the stove as if I hadn't asked anything at all. I sat at the table pretending to eat, pretending everything was normal, but the air felt different. The house no longer smelled like Mom's perfume. It smelled like lemon candles and someone else's rules. Mom's absence became something I could almost touch. Dad used to say we and mean him and me. Now we meant him and Lena. He looked happier around her, lighter somehow, and that hurt more than I expected. Every time I tried to talk about Mom, he changed the subject. Let the past rest, he'd say. But the past wasn't resting. It was wide awake, breathing through the walls. One night, I walked into my room and found Lena sitting on my bed, flipping through the old photo album I kept hidden under it. She didn't even look guilty. You were so close to your mother, she said, tracing her finger over a picture of us at the beach. She's my mom, I said. Lena looked up, her voice smooth. And yet she left you. That sentence hit like a punch. Before I could answer, Dad came in smiling. Everything good in here? Lena turned and told him, we're just bonding. I wanted to tell him the truth, but he looked so happy just hearing her say that. So I swallowed my words. After that, she started changing things around the house. First, the furniture, then the photos, then my clothes. She said she accidentally donated them. When I told Dad, he sighed and said, she's just trying to make the house feel new again. I said she was erasing Mom. He told me to stop living in the past. His voice cracked when he said it, like he needed to believe it more than I did. That's when I realized he wasn't protecting Lena because he loved her. He was protecting her because he couldn't stand the idea of being alone again. And she knew that. A few mornings later, Lena handed me a mug of coffee and said, you were talking in your sleep last night. You kept saying, don't touch me. My stomach dropped. I don't talk in my sleep. She smiled. You did last night. Dad looked up from his phone, confused. Lena brushed his arm and told him it was just a nightmare. I wanted to scream, but the look on his face stopped me. I couldn't destroy what little peace he thought he had. That afternoon, I drove back to the bakery. Mom was icing cupcakes, humming along to the radio like the world hadn't fallen apart. I told her everything, Lena's scar, her words, how she'd started living in Mom's space. Mom froze, her hand shaking so hard she dropped the spatula. She said what? She whispered. She said you left me. I told her. Mom's eyes filled with tears. She used to say that about everyone. That people leave her. That's what she does. She pushes until they do. Who is she, Mom? Mom looked out the window for a long time before speaking. Her name wasn't Lena back then. You were little when it happened. When what happened? She took a shaky breath. When she started following us. I stared at her. Following us? Like, she worked at the daycare you went to. She got too close. I pulled you out, and a week later she quit. I thought that was the end of it. I didn't know what to say. All I could hear was Lena's voice in my head. You'd be surprised what we forget from childhood. When I drove home, the sky looked darker than it should have. Lena was waiting on the porch, phone in hand. You went to see her again, she said, not even pretending it was a question. How do you know where I was? She smiled. Small town. People talk. I tried to push past her, but inside Dad was sitting at the table, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he hung up. Lena says you're making her uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? I laughed. She's in my room, she's throwing out Mom's stuff, enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table. She's family now. Something inside me cracked. If she's family, what does that make Mom? What does that make me? Lena stepped forward and put her hand on my shoulder. Your dad just wants peace, she whispered. Her nails grazed my skin. I pulled away. Don't touch me. She smiled, almost softly. You really don't remember, do you? Dad looked between us, lost. What is she talking about? I couldn't answer. I just walked upstairs and locked my door. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing. Dad's voice breaking, Lena's voice calm and steady, the way a spider might sound if it could talk. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the old photo album. Mom's handwriting was on the first page. Never forget who you are, even when they try to rewrite it. I traced the words until they blurred. By the end of that week, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap dressed up as a fresh start. Mom was gone, Dad was blind, and I was the only one who could still see the cracks forming in the walls. What I didn't know yet was that one of those cracks led straight back to the night Lena first entered our lives. Years before I ever knew her name. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps outside my door. Every whisper from downstairs carried my name, even when it didn't. I started keeping my phone beside me, recording short voice notes just to remind myself I wasn't imagining any of this. By morning, Dad acted like nothing had happened. He made pancakes, asked if I wanted to drive with him to the hardware store. Lena smiled across the table, like we were all part of one happy little family. I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting the pancakes into tiny pieces I couldn't eat. When we got home, Dad went out to mow the lawn, and Lena came up behind me in the hallway. You know, she said quietly, I really am trying. I turned. Trying what? To make this work. To make you like me. I don't, I said flatly. Her smile didn't falter. You will. You always do. That sentence stuck with me. You always do. Like she'd done this before. Like she knew how the story would go. That evening, I went through Dad's office while they were watching TV. He'd kept old family papers there, tax returns, insurance forms, birth certificates. I told myself I was just looking for anything that could explain Lena's past, but what I really wanted was proof that she didn't belong here. In the bottom drawer, I found a manila folder labeled, Daycare 2009. Inside were printed emails between my mom and someone named Elena Warren. The first one was polite. Thank you for your interest in the assistant position. We're happy to have you join our childcare center. The later ones weren't. Mom had written, Elena, you can't take her pictures home. That's not appropriate. Please delete them. The next email came 2 weeks later. We've terminated her employment. Do not contact her again. I sat there shaking, reading those words again and again until the paper blurred. Elena, drop the first letter and you get Lena. When I walked downstairs, she was sitting on the couch, looking at me like she already knew what I'd found. Your dad's in the shower, she said. We have a minute. I tried to sound calm. How long have you known him? Her eyes softened. Since you were 4. My stomach flipped. You worked at my daycare. She smiled. You remember. I remember Mom taking me out of there because someone scared me. She leaned back, completely at ease. That was me. But I didn't mean to. I just loved you too much. You were such a bright little girl. I used to tell you stories while you napped. You'd hold my hand. I wanted to scream. You followed us. I looked out for you, she said quietly. When your mom moved towns, I followed because I couldn't just let you disappear. Then I met your dad again by accident, years later. Fate brought us back together. I took a step back. You call that fate? You've been stalking us for years. Her expression hardened. You should be grateful. I'm the one who kept you safe when your mother couldn't. The front door opened and Dad came in, towel slung over his shoulder, looking confused at the tension in the room. What's going on? Lena turned to him and smiled. She's upset about the past. I told her everything. About how I used to help at her daycare. She doesn't remember. Dad frowned. Is that true? I looked at him, my voice trembling. She's been following us since I was a kid, Dad. He rubbed his face, frustrated. This is insane. Lena, you should have told me. She reached for his arm. I was afraid you'd think I was some kind of monster. I just loved that little girl, that's all. He stared at her, searching her face for the truth. I saw the moment his doubts started to fade. You were young, he said finally. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A misunderstanding? She kept pictures of me. Enough, he shouted. You're twisting everything. Lena flinched and turned away like she was crying. I just wanted to belong. That night, I stayed locked in my room again. I texted Mom everything, the emails, what Lena said, how Dad defended her. She called me instantly, her voice shaking. You need to get out of that house. Tonight. I can't, I whispered. He'll think I'm crazy. Listen to me, she said, low and serious. Lena wasn't fired because she took pictures. She was fired because one went missing. You were in it. She told people she was going to keep it forever. The police told her to stay away. I thought she did. My hands went cold. The next morning, Lena acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, kissed Dad on the cheek, hummed that same lullaby. I couldn't look at her. I kept thinking about that photo, the one she said she'd keep forever. When they left for groceries, I went through her dresser. The top drawer was filled with scarves and perfume bottles. Underneath a stack of sweaters, I found a small, white box. Inside was a photo, bent at the corners, faded with age. It was me, maybe 4 years old, asleep in a nap mat at the daycare. Someone's hand was holding mine, just out of frame. Behind the photo was a silver locket. I opened it and saw 2 tiny pictures, one of me, one of Dad. I couldn't breathe. I stuffed everything back in the box and shoved it under the bed where I'd found it. When they came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying not to show anything on my face. Lena smiled at me, her eyes bright and calm, and I knew she'd noticed the box had been moved. That night, I woke up to the sound of my door opening. I didn't move, I just listened to her footsteps on the carpet, slow and steady, stopping right beside my bed. I told you we'd always find our way back to each other, she whispered. The door clicked shut again. I lay there, frozen, until sunrise. And that's when I knew I had to choose between saving Dad's version of peace, or saving us. The morning after she came into my room, I walked downstairs pretending I hadn't heard her. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, scrolling through his phone. Lena was frying eggs, humming like she always did. The sound made my skin crawl. I kept replaying her whisper in my head. We'd always find our way back to each other. When she turned to hand me a plate, I saw the locket around her neck, the same one I'd found hidden in her drawer. My throat tightened. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I said nothing. I couldn't. I needed proof that would make Dad see what I saw. Words weren't enough anymore. After breakfast, I told him I was meeting a friend. Instead, I drove straight to Mom's. She opened the door before I even knocked twice. The look on my face must have told her everything. She's wearing it, isn't she? Mom said quietly. I nodded. She has the photo, too. The one from daycare. Mom's hands shook as she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single printed page, the police report from all those years ago. Keep this with you, she said. If your dad won't listen, the police will. But be careful, okay? Don't confront her alone. I promised I wouldn't, but deep down I already knew I was going to. When I got home, Lena was sitting on the couch flipping through one of Dad's old photo albums. She didn't even look up. You were gone a while, she said. I went to see Mom, I replied. Her eyes lifted slowly, and for the first time I saw the edge of panic behind them. Why? Because she deserves to know who's living in her house. Her face hardened. You think she didn't already know? She's the reason your father and I lost years together. You were fired from my daycare, Lena. Her voice went cold. Don't call me that. I stepped closer. What should I call you? Elena? The silence between us stretched until it hurt. Then she laughed, quiet, almost broken. Your mother always hated that I loved you. She couldn't stand that you'd run to me when you were scared. That's not love, I said. That's obsession. She stood, closing the space between us. You don't understand. Your father and I were supposed to have a family. When your mother left him, I thought it was a sign. I thought it meant we'd get our chance. I felt my voice shake. You followed us for years. I waited for years, she said. And now you're trying to take him away from me again. Before I could respond, Dad came in from the backyard, wiping his hands. What's going on? Lena turned to him, eyes shining with tears she could summon on command. She went through my things again, she said, her voice trembling. She found the locket I told you about. Dad looked at me, confused. What locket? She said it was creepy, Lena continued. But it's a family locket. It has your picture and hers. I was trying to bring us closer. I took a deep breath and slid the police report across the table. You want the truth? Read it. He frowned, picked it up, and started scanning. His lips moved silently as he read. Then he stopped. What is this? It's from when she worked at my daycare, I said. Mom had to file a report because she wouldn't leave us alone. Dad looked at Lena, eyes wide. Is this true? She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, I was young. I got attached. Attached? I said. You took pictures of me in my sleep. Dad stood up so fast the chair fell backward. Lena, tell me that's not true. She reached for him, desperate. I loved her. I just wanted a family, Paul. You know what it's like to lose someone. He stepped back. You lied to me. Her voice cracked. You think your ex-wife didn't lie? She made me out to be a monster because she couldn't handle sharing you. He shook his head. This isn't about her. This is about what you did. Her expression changed. The sadness vanished, replaced by something darker. I gave up everything for you, she whispered. And you're going to throw it away because of some old paper? Dad looked at me. Go upstairs. Now. I didn't move. I'm not leaving you with her. He glanced at me, pleading. Please. I turned, but before I reached the stairs, Lena's voice rose behind me, sharp, wild. You don't get to take her from me again. When I spun around, she was holding the locket in her hand, shaking. This is all I ever wanted. A family that stays. Dad's voice was steady now. You need to leave. She stared at him for a long time, breathing hard, then at me. Her eyes softened again, almost like pity. You'll remember me, she said quietly. You always do. Then she turned, walked to the front door, and left. The silence after she was gone was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Dad sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. I sat across from him, exhausted. I tried to tell you. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. I just wanted something to feel normal again. I didn't say it, but we both knew that nothing about our lives had ever been normal. Not with someone like her weaving through our memories, pretending to belong. That night, Dad slept on the couch. I sat by my window, watching the street. Every time a car passed, my heart jumped. I kept waiting to see her headlights, her silhouette, her shadow. But she didn't come back. Not that night. It wasn't peace I felt. It was the quiet before something else. The kind of quiet that holds its breath and waits to see who breaks first. The next morning, the house felt like it was holding its breath. The air was still, heavy, and silent in a way that didn't feel safe. Dad hadn't said a word since Lena left. He made coffee, stared out the kitchen window, and looked 10 years older than he had the night before. I didn't know if she was gone for good. Part of me hoped she'd just disappear. Another part of me knew people like her didn't walk away that easily. Around noon, the phone rang. Dad answered, said nothing for a long time, then hung up without a word. His hands were shaking. That was her, he finally said. She said she just wanted to apologize. She's at the park. She wants to see both of us. I felt my stomach twist. Don't go. I have to, he said, his voice low. I need to end this the right way. I grabbed his arm. You don't owe her anything. He looked at me, eyes tired. If I don't go, she'll never stop. I couldn't let him face her alone. When we got to the park, Lena was sitting on a bench near the pond, wearing a light blue sweater like nothing had happened. She looked calm, even peaceful. She smiled when she saw us. I'm glad you came, she said softly. Dad stood stiffly, hands in his pockets. Say what you need to say. She looked at me first. I scared you. I'm sorry for that. I didn't answer. Then she turned to Dad. And I hurt you. I never meant to. I saw a family I wanted to be part of. I thought I could fix what was broken. He shook his head. You can't build a family by stealing someone else's. Her eyes glistened, but there was something rehearsed about the tears. I just wanted you to forgive me. You need help, he said quietly. I can't give you that. She laughed then, a sound that didn't match her face. You think you can just erase me? After everything? I took a step forward. You already erased yourself. For a second, she looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the shift, the mask falling away. You don't understand, she whispered. You belong to me. You always have. Dad moved between us. We're done here. She tilted her head, watching him with that strange calm again. You used to say you wanted someone who'd never leave. He didn't answer. He just took my hand and started walking toward the car. Behind us, her voice rose. You'll come back. You always do. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. When we got home, Dad called the police. They already knew her name. The officer said she'd been questioned before for following families she used to work for, but they'd never had enough evidence to charge her. When he saw the report Mom had saved and the old emails, he told us this time might be different. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking up to footsteps in the hallway. But peace didn't feel like I thought it would. It wasn't relief. It was exhaustion, the kind that sits in your bones. 2 days later, a detective called to say they'd found Lena's car at the edge of town. She was gone. No one knew where. They promised to keep us updated. Dad didn't talk much after that. He spent hours sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. I think he was trying to figure out how his need for comfort had turned into a nightmare for both of us. One evening, he handed me a small box. Inside was the locket, the same one she'd worn. They found it in her car, he said. The police thought we should have it. I held it in my hand, cold and heavy. What do you want me to do with it? Get rid of it, he said quietly. I didn't argue. That night, I drove out to the old bridge just outside town. I stood there for a long time, the locket dangling from my fingers, moonlight catching its silver edge. Then I threw it into the river and watched the water swallow it whole. For a moment, I felt lighter. But when I turned back to my car, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a single photograph, one I'd never seen before. It was me and Dad, standing outside the house just last week. I flipped it over, and on the back, written in neat, familiar handwriting, were 3 words. Still watching. Always. I looked around, scanning the empty road, the dark trees, every shadow that could be hiding something. But there was nothing, just silence. I tore the photo in half and drove home. I didn't tell Dad. I couldn't. He needed to believe it was over. Maybe I did too. But deep down, I knew that justice wasn't always the same as peace. Sometimes, it just meant surviving the story you never asked to be part of. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what Mom once wrote in that photo album. Never forget who you are, even when they try to rewrite it. I finally understood what she meant. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about remembering the truth, and refusing to let anyone else define it for you. It's been almost a year since the day we found that photograph. Dad sold the house 2 months later. Said it was time for a new start, but I think he just couldn't stand waking up in those same rooms anymore. The ones where the walls had learned too much. We moved to a smaller place closer to the city. New neighbors, new locks, new everything. But no matter how far we went, some nights I'd still catch myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that pale blue sweater at the edge of a crowd, or a familiar shadow leaning by a parked car. I never told Dad about the photo. I wanted him to heal, and maybe I wanted to believe that silence could bury the past. But the truth doesn't disappear just because we stop talking about it. It lingers, it waits, it teaches you in whispers. In the months after we left, I started seeing Mom again, every Sunday morning. We'd meet at a small diner on the corner, the kind that still smells like burnt coffee and buttered toast. We didn't talk much about what happened. She just listened. Sometimes that's all I needed. One morning, I told her everything. About Lena, about the nights I couldn't sleep, about the way fear changes your reflection. You start seeing what others did to you instead of who you really are. She didn't interrupt. She just reached across the table and held my hand. She didn't break you, she said softly. She just showed you what love isn't. It took me a while to understand that. For a long time, I thought the story was about my dad's mistake, or Lena's cruelty, or the damage that lived between them. But it wasn't. It was about how quickly loneliness can turn people into versions of themselves they swore they'd never be. Dad isn't the same either. He still blames himself, though he tries not to show it. He joined a support group, started talking to other people who've gone through things like this. People who trusted the wrong person and almost lost everything. I think he's learning what it means to forgive himself. Sometimes I catch him smiling again. A real smile, not the kind he used to wear for show. When I see that, I realize maybe we both made it out. Not untouched, but still standing. A few weeks ago, a letter came in the mail. No return address. My heart dropped the moment I saw it. I almost threw it away without opening it, but something made me stop. Inside, there was no note, no words, just a single pressed flower, perfectly dried. The same kind Lena used to keep on the windowsill. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked to the backyard, lit the flower on fire, and watched the ash scatter in the wind. I don't know if it was from her, or just a coincidence, but either way, it didn't matter anymore. She doesn't get to own my fear. Now, when I drive past the old part of town, I sometimes wonder if she's still out there, somewhere, watching, starting over with another family. But I don't let that thought live too long. Because the truth is, not every ghost wants to haunt you. Some just want to be remembered. Mom said something the other day that stuck with me. She said, you can't choose what people bring into your life, but you can choose what stays. So I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing forgiveness, not for her, but for me. Because every story has to end somewhere, and this one deserves to end with light, not fear. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that justice isn't always about seeing someone pay. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your voice, rewriting the ending, and refusing to let the worst parts of your past become the loudest. I still see Mom every Sunday. We laugh more now. The silence between us isn't heavy anymore, it's full of understanding. And sometimes, when I look at her across the table, I think about how easily we almost lost each other to someone else's madness. Then I remember that I still see her every week, not because of fear, or guilt, or unfinished business, but because some people, no matter how life twists around them, always find their way back to the ones who matter. And maybe that's the real ending. Not the revenge, not the escape, but the return. The quiet realization that love, real love, survives the wreckage.